thank you all for coming. Y'all got your food. Feel free to get up as you need any more, and then we're gonna have some presentation after this, kind of go over, review what we've done for the last several weeks, and then at the end of this, we've got a nice little celebration for us. So hang out. You know, it's PG. We are in the school district boundaries, but still something to look forward to. Just a reminder. Okay, yeah. So the next step from here as far as meetings is if we go forward tonight with recommendations to advance to the school board, then July 25th is a targeted date to make that presentation to them. And from there, they will take it. And hopefully, I think we've got a good package that we'll be advancing, and there will be an election in November. Am I leaving anything out? Daryl?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and just that date there at the bottom. The last day to call for this election is August 22nd. So, yeah, we definitely, July 25th, we want to be before the board. And I mentioned that, and just, okay. And then before I hand it off, though, just want to tell y'all thank you. District says thank you for everybody spending your time, whether it's in person or on Zoom, but this is a really important process that we've been working through, and from here we're going to have to share with all our neighbors and friends all the good work and good things that are going to be part of this package. So there's more work to be done, to be continued, but for tonight we'll just wrap it up.
Hey, good evening, everybody. So I'm going to talk for just a second about, we're going to talk tonight about a recap of what the committee's done to this point, what we did on Monday evening, and then talk about what you have on your table. You have, like we have every week, the agenda. You've got the PowerPoint slides printed and 3-hole punched for your binders. And you also have, there we go. Everybody also has a printed copy. So when we went through the deliberation worksheet on Monday evening, and then we went through the summary worksheet, finished with hand votes on the items and finished up the list, this is where we landed. So you have a copy of that. That is there for your binders and there for you to refer to. We're going to talk about that and refer to a little bit later this evening, but just please make note that you have that. If you don't have one, let me know. We'll grab you one, but everybody should have them at their table. Tonight we're going to have a little discussion. We want to make sure you use that as a tool. We're going to have some discussion about where we landed and how everybody's feeling about that. Okay. So, just remind everybody about our committee charge. We've run through this a number of times, and just understand we've got a mission here to make sure everybody's following this. As we have some discussion tonight, keep your committee charge in mind. You guys see this every meeting. You saw this again Monday night. So let's just make sure we're mindful of that. Then, and this is really important. We covered this Monday night, and this is really important for our discussion again this evening. Just remind yourself, we've got 4 really important questions to ask ourselves. How is this going to address the anticipated growth in Dripping Springs ISD? As we all know, what you packaged on Monday night, a significant portion of that responds to growth that's coming to the district. How will your bond package address immediate property maintenance needs across the district? And then how will this position us for the future as a community and a school district? And what's the cost to the district if we do not get a bond referendum passed? So, talk about a little bit about where we go from here. So, next steps, as Jennifer mentioned, there is a planned presentation, if all of this continues to where the committee recommends that, to the board on July 25th, and anytime between now and August 22nd, the board can choose to call the election. So we'll talk a little bit about activities beyond the called bond referendum and what that looks like. And then we're going to take a second and chat for a minute before, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what does a bond planning process look like. Let's go back and talk about where we go from here. So I'd like to just have everybody take a second. Let's just reflect on what we did on Monday evening. I've thought about it a lot. I'm sure all of you had a couple nights to sleep on it and think about this. So we finished up on Monday night landing on a bond referendum right at $500 million. I'd like to just have everybody, let's just talk out loud for a second and give us an understanding. I'm going to bring a gentleman up in a minute. We're going to chat about that because we have some, want to make sure we're responding to any concerns you have, any feedback you have. How does everybody think, based on where we landed on $500 million last on Monday night, about what that looks like in the community and support for that bond referendum? How do you guys feel? Where do you feel like you stand relative to support for a bond referendum of that dollar value? Yes, ma'am.
I feel like overall that we have some things that the majority of the community can get behind, but
Okay.
there's one school that does not see their name anywhere represented in this list, one existing school. The new school obviously does not need anything, it's brand new. And I know I harped on it at the end of last meeting and we were kind of rushed about it, but you know, the CLNI at Rooster got cut while the Dripping Springs Elementary CLNI did not. When the people in Belterra say, what's in this for me and my kids, they're not going to see anything. And there are a lot of voters in Belterra. So not only is it an equity issue, but I think it's also an issue of optics, personally. You know, the parents at one elementary school nearly sank the last bond. The bond passed by 51, I think, 51 votes.
37.
Okay, 37. So if we kick off one of the parents at one of the elementary schools, are we going to endanger this bond? I just think we have to consider that, especially since it's a less than $200,000 line item. I mean, by the time you spread that out over the entire tax base, that's nothing.
What were y'all thinking? Y'all started to say something, a couple of y'all.
I mean, we were talking about it before along the same lines. I mean, you said it's a rounding error, numbers of this size, and while it's a fantastic program and I support the building for it, to come out and say we're going to spend $3 million for the 18+ building, which will service 20 to 30 students, but yet, the number of elementary students that roll through Rooster, we're admitting a $150,000 project that can really improve that space that all those students use. It doesn't.
Well, and I don't know that it's going to make people vote against the bond, but will it get people to come out and vote for the bond, period?
And so my answer is a Rooster parent.
Yeah, but you represent all the Rooster parents?
I talk to the PTA president pretty regularly. I have a decent handle on the Rooster parents, and I live in the neighborhood. I go to a lot of neighborhood events. I've spent a lot of time talking to people in that neighborhood, and they all seem in support of the bond as long as their tax rate doesn't change. That's generally the consensus I get out of all of them. As long as their tax rate doesn't change, we'll support whatever it is the school needs. They also realize too, at least I realize that the next building that would need modernization is Rooster. And to me, looking at this logically, the regret I have is not saying yes to those additional classrooms at DSE. Finish one entire building and the next bond, do the next building. That's in my logical thought process. We're going to add in a fire lane, we're going to do all these other things, but the next bond, they're going to come back and ask for those same collaborative classrooms. Are we potentially going to have to undo things that we've done with this bond to be able to add those things? Because they're not going to stop asking for it.
Well, then I talked to people who are in other districts, like Leander, for example, and their last bond had, how many million dollars? But it didn't include anything in the Travis County part of Leander ISD, and those people didn't vote like they normally do. The rate of voting that they normally come out, they just stayed home because there wasn't anything in it for them.
Well, the Rooster parents, what they want is they want that high school over there more than
I
they care about the Rooster.
I hope. I'm just throwing it out there. I hope that they want it more than they look at the list and see, and don't see their school on here at all.
I would hope that they would look at the fact that there are other schools involved, and not just online, and just think that Rooster Springs is the only one that could benefit out of that.
I don't think people vote for their own best
Well, I think the new high school over there certainly works the.
Yeah, they don't want their kids driving
And the
290, they're
expansion of
delighted that that will
Sycamore
go
Springs
away.
Middle School.
As long as they're thinking that far out in advance, the kids who either have kids at school or at kindergarten.
Yeah.
Hear more
Again,
about
I would
the
say, again, I would say you're
school and the high school than we do about elementary.
you're willing to write checks here for a rounding. I mean, I mean, the total scheme of a $500 million bond, it's $195,000. You want to run the risk that the thing goes down because somebody, because 37 people get aggravated about that?
I think there's a bigger issue with selling a bond than Rooster Springs.
Rooster
People
Springs.
don't-
I think-
Whether you sell the bond or not is, that's what the votes are. And it's binary, you either get it done or you don't. You don't, you're gonna get it, if we don't get it in November, then, we're gonna have to come back, the district's gonna have to recalibrate and come back in May.
Well,
I'm just saying, let's maximize the opportunity to pass.
What does the $200,000 extra do to our 35 cents?
Well, let me, so we can, that's a pretty minimal number relative to the scale of the bond. Let me just mention one thing that is important. I think it'd be important, because all of you have developed this, to remind yourselves, there is, aside from that individual project, there is something, there are multiple things that touch every campus in the bond. There are safety and security items and technology items that do touch everything. Now, that project, may want to have some additional discussion about it, but I want everybody to be clear that the bond, for some things, does touch every campus. So just to be clear on that issue. So this is really good discussion to have. Let's step back and revisit this for a second. On the strength of what is packaged currently, how do you all feel about whether this will be approved by the voters or not? Look across the entire committee. What do you think? Okay? It feels like it's probably a toss-up. Feel like it's a toss-up. Anybody have any?
$5 million is a lot.
Can you say why you think it's a toss-up?
It's because of the 37, because the poor performance as far as the voting and how it passed on the last bond. I think probably something that may work to advantage is how gross the AISD bond is. in
Well,
comparison to
yeah, I saw
ours.
that in the news this morning,
But-
but AIC is a huge.
I understand that, but I mean, if you ever look at the number, I think.
Right, that's what I'm
Well,
saying.
at least it's not, billion and a half dollars.
Well,
I think
AISD
it's certainly-
is.
I understand it's not a billion. Yeah, I understand that, but when we're talking about the optics of it, people are still not happy about the 2018 law that are here in the district. And so they haven't forgotten about it.
Anybody have any other opinions about the bond as it's packaged now? Yes, ma'am.
I mean, everyone I talk to, their first question is their tax rate going to increase? So like, how much is that going to increase my tax rate? And when I say it's going to hold the INS at 35 cents, it will not increase your tax rate, they're like, oh, okay, well then why wouldn't I vote for it? That seems to be the general consensus. I mean, if there's a way that we could make that M&O number go down, but probably not. Catherine should be, but I mean, like, that's the census I get, is they care about their tax rate more than.
But will that motivate them to vote?
Oh,
Will they be
I think
motivated to
everybody's
vote?
voting this November.
The people.
I think there's going to be a huge increase. in
And it's not
voting.
gonna be on the
It's
school
not,
bond
my
either.
concern is that everybody, all of our values went up substantially. So all of our taxes are going up. So no matter what, we say, oh, your taxes aren't going up, everybody's going to get a bill.
But not because of this.
Not because of this.
Overall, and a lot of people are not going to sit there and dissect and look, their taxes are going to be higher. And and I can't remember last year when it all went out, but it's about that same time of year that all that, we'll get that lovely little letter from Hayes County.
Is that in January?
No, it went out in November last year.
They'll finalize it in June.
And we'll get the actual.
Yeah.
So I want to introduce you to somebody, it's a colleague of mine, we worked together for a long time. And then as we're talking about, eventually at some point we're going to talk about what it looks like to promote a bond campaign. We didn't land on, I want to make sure, we finished last night, on Monday night, reading the room and sleep. We finished on Monday night, and reading the room, I felt, a part of the room felt like, hey, we're done, we voted, let's wrap this up. Part of the room felt like, hey, I don't know if we've talked about some of these items enough. So I want to make sure we vet that. Also want to talk about, do we feel like, as a committee, looking at the community, because make no mistake, recommend to call a bond referendum to the trustees, and they call, this group is going to be a part of cheerleading this entire effort as an effort to make sure the community supports it. So we want to make sure that you support it, and you feel like it's right and the right amount. And if we have some concerns there, I want to introduce Ryan Gregory, because we've worked together for a very long time. Ryan is a communications specialist that deals with this very issue. How do we communicate, package, and promote bond referendums? And so Ryan's got a lot of experience in all regions of the state. He's done more than 130 of these, and Ryan follows the trends for us very closely on what's been happening in the last bond cycles. So as we enter this discussion about how you're feeling about the dollar figure where it landed on Monday night, I want Ryan to talk about some of his experience, because some of the things you're talking about are really pertinent to things that may cause you to look at this if you have some concerns. Think about how to handle this, because part of what we want to do tonight is have you comfortable with what we're going away with. And if any of you have discomfort with where we landed on Monday, then let's talk about it. If everybody says, look, we're behind it, and maybe it seems high, maybe not, and you can package this up and promote it and certainly work to get it passed. You guys have put a lot of effort in. We're not trying to dismiss that at all. I just want to make sure that everybody uniformly is on the same page, and we can answer some questions and get you talking about things if you have concerns. And I want Ryan to also talk about, as the complexion of what you have packaged here, what things have tended to cause concern from a voter perspective, those that haven't, and how that trends to making a bond package successful or not. So we'll let Ryan introduce himself, talk a little bit about that, and let's revisit that discussion about where you feel like we are relative to what you packaged on Monday night.
Thanks, Daryl. I think you covered my introduction. I'm Ryan. I'm excited to be here. I love this conversation. Just got into the Hayes County website, pulled up numbers from 2018, and I think that'd be a good place to start. I do want to start by saying this. We don't want to fail a bond, okay? We want to do the right thing. There is talking to Daryl and the administration here, obviously, we've got a really big challenge in Dripping Springs as it relates to the growth. So all the campuses are already over capacity. There's temporary buildings going up left and right. The longer we put that off, the more it impacts student education, right, and what our teachers do for our kids. So we have a very important responsibility as a committee. This lady just said everybody's going to vote in November. We have the Abbott-Beto showdown. Okay, so you go back to the Beto-Cruz showdown and you look at the numbers. And I'm going back to 2018, Dripping Springs ISD, May, where your ISD school bond, you had 3,312 total votes. That's right at about 3% total voter turnout, which is laughable.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute about what COVID has done. Okay, and as we're starting to kind of crawl out of COVID, what the trends are. Okay, but looking at 2018, so this is pre-COVID, right? You had a 3% voter turnout, which is about 3,000 votes. You passed it by 38 votes. Okay, so you've got a very red county, red school district, and they're very conscientious about how they're voting for their school bonds. We need to be aware of that. With this Abbott-Beto showdown, you can anticipate a 40+% turnout for the school bond, voting for the school bond. So if you had, I'm just doing the math, 3,300 votes in 2018, we can anticipate having as many as 43,000 votes if we pull the trigger on a $500 million bond referendum on the November ticket. So if you take the 43,000 votes, that effectively means if I take the 3% and I do the multiplication, we're after roughly 22,000 voters, yes votes, to get this thing through. That's a lot of voters. So keep that in mind, okay? And now let's talk about November and May, okay? Because I talked with Daryl, and I understand you've done a lot of really good, important work here in terms of pulling this 500 million. The need is way beyond 500 million. We all know that. The majority of it is driven by needed space for all the kids that are already here and the many more that are coming, right? So the need is obvious. 500 million makes all the sense in the world. But I'll say it again, we don't want to fail a bond. And Daryl said kind of right off the bat, you know, in terms of your gut reaction after Monday in this community, y'all live here, you know the people. Are they going to support $500 million this November? Or, where did I say it was? 22,000 people that reside in the school district going to go vote yes for $500 million? We need to think about that. And it's a real simplistic way to think about it. But it is part of the process. It's part of the educational process that we need to know in making the right decisions. Okay? And we're going to talk a little bit more about, you know, alternative options. Do we reduce the size of the bond right now? But if we do that, how do we do that? Because the need is there, the growth is there, and there's a new high school involved. It's more than XYZ% of the total thing. So let me get to what's become so challenging besides the Abbott-Baker showdown and the number of voters we're going to be dealing with. In 2019, the Texas legislature created a whole bunch of new laws. Our legislators are consistently creative in inventing ways to make it tough for our school districts to pass school bonds. 5 years ago, we'd be having a different conversation, okay? But since 2019, they've created some additional laws that create some additional challenges for us that support public schools, school bonds, and school growth. One of those changes was they had the creation of separate propositions. So now anything dealing with the classroom or general academics gets Proposition A, right? Packaged into one proposition. Then we have a separate proposition for technology items that aren't built into the campus, like hardware, computers, devices. So you have a Proposition B. Now keep in mind, before 2019, we could call a bond referendum and they go to vote for the bond. Prop A, right? Now we can have Prop A, B, C, D. B is your technology. If we consider doing a stadium, we now have a Prop C. So it's basically giving the voters choices on what they want to approve with the amounts. But it also creates a lot of confusion, voter fatigue, misunderstanding. You're pulling out stadiums, which creates kind of a negative sentiment because a lot of the more, what I'll call conservative voters don't feel that the stadiums are necessary. And that can have a negative impact on Proposition A, and we've seen that. Another change in the law was they created a requirement that within the ballot language, we have to include a sentence that says this is a property tax increase. Even if there is not, in this case, a property rate increase on the INS. It's still required to be written in the ballot. So in a lot of cases, your school bond ballots, it's the last sentence in the language. This is a property tax increase. So if you have 11,000 voters, many of whom are not educated on this process, the decisions that were made, many of which don't even know what a school bond is. They go to the ballot, they look, they're voting for Abbott, and then they see Dripping Springs ISD, and they read the ballot, right, real quick. They look at the first sentence, they look at the last sentence. This is a property tax increase, and you know what they do? Look against it. So we have a lot of challenges as it relates to just understanding the dynamics. Okay, so now let's talk about November. So in 2020, around March, some argue 2019 in the fall, COVID hits, right? So in May, we have uniform election dates, May and November. In May of 2020, COVID had hit, and this state had two elections, school bond elections statewide. Surprisingly, both elections passed. But I dismiss that cycle, and I'm only looking at the numbers starting in November of 2020. So I'm taking November of 2020, May of 2021, November of 2021, and May of this year. And I'm looking at the numbers for school bonds across the state. In general, the numbers for May are much more positive. Here's the other issue. A lot of that positive margin in May is driven purely by apathy. I'm seeing voter turnout go from XYZ% to XYZ% because COVID is keeping people home. They're not going and voting. So that's another major challenge. But at the same time, you've got the Abbott-Baker race. In November, we're starting to come out of COVID. People are a little less concerned about staying home. So I do anticipate there being a surge of traffic at the polls this November. So keep that in mind. And you're in a very, very conservative district. I mean, I look at 2018, that speaks volumes. So keep that in mind. And you have to own this. Again, you live here, you know the people, you know the word on the street. If we think that we can garner the support of over 11,000 people to go and vote yes, you mentioned a $200,000 project that a couple of neighborhoods are going to go yes, and it's going to generate a couple of hundred yes votes. We need thousands. We need thousands to be able to even begin to touch a successful outcome. So it's not any one project. It's, for November, it's the entire district. It's all the voters. And so keep that in mind. Can we go to the voters and ask for $500 million and win? Yeah. It's going to take a significant effort. And everybody, as I mentioned, we don't want to fail the bond. Everybody's in this room, if we can take ownership of it and we're willing to do the work, door to door, to get it done, we can make it happen. The district needs it. There's a $800 million need here plus, right? So the work that you've done is great work. It's valid, it's justified. The demographer, the demographics show we need this, our kids need this. There's a transition going on in Dripping Springs, and it's going to be this way for several years to come, and it ain't stopping. So you do have a great challenge ahead of you. We're here to help, facilitate the conversation, facilitate the process, and I guess we just want to have a dialogue. Number one, just gut check. Or can we get to 11,000 votes for yes at 500 million? And if not, what do we as a committee need to think about? What will they support? Is it 400 million? If we cut it by 25%, can we go out on the streets and say, hey, we sharpened our pencil, we took 25% out, and we're only asking for 400 million right now. And then we come back, the other consideration that's taking place in a lot of what I'll call fast growth districts all over the state, in lieu of going for the whole enchilada, they're chopping them up. Okay, so instead of the 500, you do it 250, 300, come back again in 2 years, do another 250, 300, especially in growth districts, but there's several ways to skin the cat. Again, not dismissing the fact that we could go out for the whole enchilada and win, but it's going to take a lot of work.
Ryan, take a second. I want Ryan to talk about one other dynamic with how this is packaged currently, is what in the recent history athletics stadium propositions have looked like. Because you have academic spaces, you have stadiums, you have technology, but in general, there's been some major trend and impact of athletic propositions that sit on their own to bond referendums and the balance of the rest of the bond referendums. So I want Ryan to talk about that.
So I've been tracking voter outcomes all over the state, particularly those 4 voting cycles that I mentioned earlier. And I just want to talk real quick. The technology proposition in general, Proposition B, that is your hardware, your devices, your computers. Prop B is passing across the board, even in cases where Prop A hasn't passed, which is crazy. In pretty much every instance where the classroom Prop A passed, Prop B is a given. It's passed with it. Okay? When you start adding a stadium or anything what I call C+, might be a practice facility, an auditorium, performing arts center, things very quickly just nosedive. Okay, so those propositions, what I'll refer to as C+, in May, 48% approval. This is statewide. Of all the elections for Prop C+ in May, you got 48% approval. Now here's the fun part for November. 28% approval in November in those 2 cycles. The stadiums and anything outside of A and B in November are really, really struggling since COVID hit. The other dynamic that I have seen, sometimes there is this kind of thought that, well, we want to float what I'll call a sacrificial lamb and put a Prop C out there, and then maybe we can get Prop A, and they'll toss out the stadium, right? Unfortunately, what we're seeing is when you bring in the Prop C, the margin of approval for Prop A actually goes down. So the overall voter sentiment for the overall bond program goes down when you include a stadium. That's something that's important to remember. So I guess I could argue that in cases where you have a Prop A, a Prop B, and a C+, by removing the C+, you increase the percentage margin of the possibility of passing. Yes, ma'am.
What's the increase in percentage of margin invested?
Don't have the exact number, but it's,
Ballpark?
I'm sorry,
Can you ballpark?
15%. It's not very slim.
What's the ratio of statewide costs in Northern May versus November?
Hey, so the mic can pick it up. Can everybody, when you ask a question, just make it extra loud?
Number of props in May versus November?
Yes. Are the districts realizing that it's better to go to May for everything?
That's a great question, and what I'll give you is 50-50. So beginning in May of 2020, if I took the 4 that I talked about, it's about 50-50. But right now, because of the trends we've seen with May and November, people are swinging towards May. So this past May, there was a surge of bond activity across the state. And we saw, compared to November, a higher hit rate, so to speak, in the success of the bonds. This November, we've seen a dip in the number of propositions compared to the previous November. So we see November actually going down. I anticipate May of 23 will be higher. So that's another consideration. If we in fact go, gosh, we're a little concerned about November, let's take a step back, take a deep breath, look at going in May, you're also going to be competing with a whole heck of a lot more bonds across the state. So what's that? Yes, ma'am.
What is the impact of the district waiting to May?
We don't get an elementary school opening on
So the question was, what's the impact to the district if the district waits? We're talking with Clint about that. He can talk about that from a facilities perspective.
The same impact as the bond.
Let's let Clint answer that.
So the biggest impact that people would see, that parents would see, and our schools would see, would be if we went out in November and passed, that allows us to open elementary 6 and the Sycamore expansion a year sooner. The direct impact of pushing those projects back is essentially 6 months difference in a bond election will cost us the school year. It's roughly a dozen more portables for the 2024-2025 school year.
I'm sorry, continuing that train of thought, so it's a dozen more portables. Now I lost the rest of the train of
And
thought.
elementary 6 can't open.
Elementary six.
Sycamore can expand.
6 more than that, yeah. Does it delay the high school project at all?
Most likely, yes, it would. And your ability to open the high school, I mean, because it's a 4-year process, there's a little more variability there, but it's our first and only time to ever build a second high school. So I think it'll take every bit of the 4 years of design, planning, all that stuff, all that needs to happen on the front end to make sure we get that right. So I think the most likely outcome would be the ability to open that in August of 26, most likely becomes August of 27.
I want to jump in on this real quick because I've been in a lot of fast growth communities like this. It's so important to understand the challenge that we have in Dripping Springs with the growth that's already hit and the growth that our demographer says is coming. The longer we put this off, the more temporary buildings go onto your campus. And we all know temporary buildings are expensive, they're a huge drain on taxpayer dollars, and they're unsafe for students and teachers in general. Okay, they just are. And it's important that whatever we move forward with and we take to our taxpayers, we have to communicate the fact that the longer we put this off, the more temporary buildings and the more unsafe we're making our school campuses. Oh, and by the way, it also becomes more expensive. Things are not ever going to get cheaper. So, yeah, we can wait till May, we can wait till next November and try to get the appetite right for the number. But the longer we put this off, it becomes that much more challenging for our facilities people, for our students, because we have to put students in seats. And they're coming. They're going to keep coming.
And again, the long-range facility development was delayed by a year and a half because of COVID as well. So we're already behind.
Yes, compounding.
So let's ask
And
this.
we're seeing a change in our demographic where we are suddenly at 16% elementary growth.
Right.
So you have to remember, that was not our case previously. That is a post-COVID effect in our district. And that's atypical.
As we step through this, and please, we implore you to speak up. We need this tonight. If everybody lands on, hey, we did this Monday night and we're good, and I try to talk talk you in any different direction. I wanted to make sure that we walk through what we talked about Monday night, any feedback you have. I wanted Ryan, because of his expertise, to talk about the dynamics of, it's great that we landed here, but what does that mean in packaging this and propositions, and what do various propositions potentially do to a package bond that goes out to the voters, be it November, May, whenever. So take those things into account. Let's revisit for a second. Anybody not feel good about where you are and what you did Monday night relative to the community supporting it in a November election?
I think it's too high.
Okay?
I think it's too much.
We have a think it's too high, and we have a think of question whether we support
I
it.
think
in
the
November.
community can support schools to accommodate growth. But some of this is wish list stuff. Even the band director used the terminology wish list.
Okay.
And that tape were to get out in the community, he was asked by the principal, what do you want? It is, right, but if somebody listens to that, I mean, it's what do you want? Because that didn't come out of long-range planning. We didn't talk about band stuff and parking lots and lights on the long-range planning facility. My other question is, are the election laws and how you set them up different in May versus November? It's the same, because when I went to that trial that happened in 18, and what I learned along the way were the election law was different for a May bond election versus November bond election. And that was a big aha for me. So what I learned out of that was you can get your employees that live in the district to go out and vote in May, you're going to be successful in bond. And coming from a high growth district down Clear Lake, League City area, that's what we were told as employees.
Yeah, so-
Get out and vote, we got this.
Okay, so, but if I back out, look, if I back out departmental needs projects that you just classified as wish list, I get.
No, I didn't say all departmental needs. I
Okay,
said,
but-
I specifically
but-
said the band director.
Okay, that's the
mentioned that.
departmental needs, but to my point, you dropped it from 500.7 to 497. You've knocked $3 million on it.
So
I
here's
haven't looked at
what
the
I
numbers.
want y'all to think about, is your charge from the very beginning has been to create a package that will pass. That's the work that has to happen. When I walk down that plank towards the sharks, you're all with me. So guess what? Let's be in this together and figure out, there's something on there that's not gonna get us elementary school, and we've got 16% growth. We can't have it. We have to figure out what it is now, and you're the group who has been doing this since 2019. You've had 16 meetings, you've walked our facilities, you understand our needs. Y'all have to be the people to say, I think Brewster has to have the library, I'm not sure we can do the band lot. Like, this is where that happens. So when you're looking at that list, it has to be with a critical eye to what's going to actually work here. Because it's not worth it for us to do November and it not pass. And it's not worth it for us to do May and it not pass, because all we're gonna do is keep adding portables. I don't know that I feel portables are unsafe, I'll say that as well. But I do think they create
Sorry,
a
personal
lot- They create a lot of administrative challenges. And it's not the best learning environment for our kids. We would prefer a building where there is an inside the school community. That's what we want to build. That's why we build good facilities for our kids, so they've got a great learning environment. That's why a CLNI is important. So in order for us to give kids the best learning experience, we have to have the schools. So I would just ask that we look back and think about the charge that we've been saying since day one. It was written intentionally for you to be the group who really helps to figure out what you really, truly going to want. I'll sit back down and see.
Yes, ma'am. So anybody that talks, just please raise your voice a little bit.
So when we write one, are all these line items enumerated as is here?
Good point. So Ryan addressed that, you can address that again. There will not be a list that looks like this in a bond referendum. There will be propositions in a bond referendum that will have a description attributed to them.
So it won't say, it'll say road project this month. What are the general categories put in?
So re-explain the props and what those look like, they're not going to appear on the ballot.
Basically, anything dealing with new construction, classroom, campuses, high schools, elementary schools, additions to your middle school, just think about it, generic,
Think of
structure
the
building.
growth category as being a proposition.
Sure, but what would it say?
Well, it's gonna say, for their approval, to allow the district to sell bonds for, construction of school facilities, purchasing of school buses, and sites for future construction. It's very generic language that just says for
There
the,
are no specifics.
no specific projects listed in the individual.
Proposition itself.
Now, when you get into Proposition B, it will specifically say for technology items for academic purposes, and Prop C will say for renovations to a stadium. Sometimes they'll actually name
So
the
there
actual.
will be no insight on the bond language itself, on what any of this is.
Now, with bond council, we could work to, new high school, elementary school, for the construction of, we can actually include the verbiage that specifically states new high school.
But
and
it
elementary
would
school.
probably not say new high school, 60% of the cost.
You have a breakdown by size of the transitions.
Yeah, we can
see.
So the result of this discussion determines how these get packaged and what dollar values are, because where we landed last night, if we package this up without your input, we could do that and package these propositions.
So you have a stage,
You say it's almost 15.
15 million.
So you have a proposition for,
Sorry, so that's 485. Okay, so 485 for Prop A, 15 for Prop C. Now pull out B, which is a margin of A, say 10 million. 15
Well,
million.
so that's not wondering what is that number right now?
Oh, Prop A alone is going to be
No,
150.
probably the technology, which of these line items are going to fall under property?
but
The security items, the cameras and all that, they're
Might as well
built into
try.
the owner property of that. Anything built into the technology is property.
portion of the bond we pulled out. Right, so we would have to actually pull out, if it's, there's a total of, the technology modernization,
No.
10.5 million.
So that's the only one.
But not all of that gets pulled out separately.
Is it
If
like
it's infrastructure,
projected?
So think about it this way. You have a problem.
Explicitly say that?
it would be about, between 7 and 8
but-
million.
So your
as a device
rate will
portion
not
that
increase.
we-
What we can do is qualify that sentence by saying, this is a requirement of legislative law X, Y, Z. And I've seen in lieu of putting that sentence as the last sentence,
Like
they
in the
put,
middle?
yes, they sandwich it.
Does it also say there's no tax rate increase?
This is a property tax.
Yes, ma'am.
That's a lie.
That's sort of that.
But it's a lie. Like, how is it a
Not
lie?
really, no, not really, it's not a lot.
It's not
Chris-
It's
increasing
not a
your
lot,
tax
because
rate.
districts that don't have to build, don't
Talking about
have
our
that
district.
extra.
If you don't take on the debt,
But
you pay down the
Districts
debt,
that aren't having to build don't have
your net
that
increase
extra
goes down.
tax.
Your net
So
taxes
it
go
is
down.
increasing your tax rate.
But for
We've
that
just
person who's
had to
voting.
learn that every year, we're gonna have this, this tax we have to pay because this is a high-growth district.
Right.
But technically it is, because we were out in West Texas with one school, we wouldn't be paying that bond tax.
Well, sure, but the voter's not living in West Texas, they live here.
I
And so their
understand, but it
tax rate
is a
is
tax
not
increase, literally it is, but we kind of have learned to live with it. And our hopes is that it doesn't become higher than what we've already been paying all these years. Because it sounds like, in looking at demographics, we're going to continually having to have bonds for the next few years. And when you look at high-growth districts, that's what they do. They
how it
go through a
That's how the
20-year
people that are moving in
20-year
pay
thing
schools,
of
we have
having to pay
Correct.
bond taxes.
You had a question. I'll field them as I see them. Yes,
So
ma'am.
I'm relatively new to this process in terms of like actually being boots on the ground with it. How do you market this to the people that live in the district? Like, I
So
would not
we're gonna-
have known a lot of the details to her question. If it's not stated in the bond on voting day, I would not have known what these needs were or how great the needs were or the specifics.
So that's a great segue to something we're going to talk about as we wrap up tonight.
Okay.
So Ryan's going to run through in just a little bit, but this is important to not move off of it for right now.
Okay.
He's going to talk about what that process looks like, how that flows beyond the committee landing where it wants to land relative to making a recommendation to the trustees. Okay? So that's coming. Yes, ma'am.
We talked briefly last time about that property tax exemption from the 25,000 to the 40,000, and the state's covering the difference. Can we package that language? Yay, there's a bond, but also you're gonna get $15,000 more credit. That can be part of it.
Yes, that's part of the education message.
Yes.
But that,
And
but
so-
like, in light of
selling of it.
education,
So let's do this. Anything to do with the promotion of the campaign, let's defer some of that to a little bit later because Ryan's going to run through that with everybody. Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question about the concept of passing the bond, and I don't know how to do this. The question I want to ask, and I don't mean to put anybody on the spot, but if anybody's here who voted against the 2018 bond, is there anything, obviously they might have a like mind of the people who might vote against the bond now, right? So is there anything that we could ever say to those people to make them want to pass the bond?
I think you could.
Really?
Yes.
I mean, we need
I
it.
know, I remember one of the
Absolutely
things,
need-
one of
we
the
absolutely
things that
need
came
this.
out with that 2018 bond, I remember, was the cost of sinks and art rooms. And I don't know where that, it was an itemized that came out, and I remember that was a big hubbub, and all these eyebrows went
But
up.
only
like,
because somebody
why are we
made it a big
spending
hubbub.
$10,000? No, they did not make it up, it was on a line
Well, somebody
item
made
sheet.
it a hubbub. They didn't make it up. They made it a
$10,000
hubbub.
for a sink and an art room is very expensive.
$10,000 for one sink?
Yes, and that got taken out. So, again, I think that was that, I remember hearing lack of transparency. We're sneaking in things and getting things because it goes back to Proposition A. We're building an elementary school, a high school, da-da-da-da-da. It's very general in the way it is. And then when the line items come out and you're seeing how much sinks cost and this, and we've got people out there that pull up stuff and are very good about pulling up stuff, and all of this is out there right now. So eventually, people are going to be able to look at this, they're going to see. And then they're, well, that's not what proposition, there's more in a proposition A than I
There's always
thought.
going to be things that people don't want to pay for. Always. In every single bond. And so is there ever going to be, is there ever a package that we can do, that we can put forward that's going to make those people go, yes? I don't think so.
Well, and I know, like on one of our tours, like at Durban Springs Middle School, to be honest, we were walking down that hallway, and Clint, you said, this needs landscaping. You know what I thought? Eagle Scout project. That's an Eagle Scout project. Bleachers in the gym, the practice gym. My thought was, why do you have bleachers in a practice gym? Because being in an experience, I had experience at a junior high, that was a practice gym, it wasn't a competition gym, it's two different kinds of things. However, if it's because they're competing and they're having competitions on Saturdays, maybe we need to look at our rent rates. Maybe if people are wanting to be there on Saturdays, we need to raise rent so that people can have what they want when they're renting, that kind of stuff. Those are the kinds of things that I think people that have come from high growth districts and have experience, that's what they're looking at and that's what they want to hear.
Chris, I'll get to you after. Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering if you could speak to the overall demographic statistics in the county. I mean, I know that, or could you speak to the overall demographics in the district, the change that we've seen in Hayes County, like particularly in the last November election? Hayes County was blue, it was not red. And so I'm wondering what that impact has.
If you look at the zip codes,
What that,
76.
can I finish my
Yeah.
sentence? Thank you. I'm wondering what the impact of the people moving in are. Is the trend of the people moving in, are they fiscally conservative or not? Like, do we have a good feel for who all these new people are? Well, I'm one of them since 2018. What that population looks like. That's going to be a big difference in how this is going to go down.
Dripping Springs is a 50-50 district.
But I don't think it was 50-50 in 2018.
But to answer your question, yes, we will have that.
That's going to make a big difference.
That would be gathered during a campaign and a promotion.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, Chris.
So is there any data on this? Because there's a mentality of that, you know, like when you're buying a car, $29,999, right? And so you got a straight up $500 million. If it's $475, it's a mental pass, and we can make that choice. But is there any data that you have based on whether it be property values, mean income, as to what that value is to be able to pass some of these bonds, or anything along those lines that gives you a gut check that, man, you should really probably look at bringing this thing down a little bit, or anything like that?
No hard data,
Okay.
but you used a key word, it's a gut feeling.
Yeah.
And I have found in a lot of communities similar to this, it is a gut feeling. And it's as simple as going, is it 500 million or will they pass 495?
Yeah.
And, that's kind of the thing. You just kind of go, I think we could get 495, we ain't getting 5.
I have a question. So 500 million is at the same tax rate? Just throwing numbers out there, I know we need a lot more than that, but say you put 250 million, the tax rate's probably still going to stay the same, correct? Because you're going to restructure debt and all the other things that go with it. It's not like if we bring this down to half, then there's going to be a tax rate decrease.
Kathy, did you hear her? Can
I
you take a second?
did, yeah, so basically my answer is, well, I'll repeat what Dan Wegmiller said a couple of weeks ago, which is, there's this thought that you can do a service to the taxpayers by lowering the debt, even if debt rate even a couple of cents. But what happens when you do have to increase that the next time you've got to do something, right? Then everyone's going to remember the tax rate increase.
Yep.
And that bond or whatever you have to do for that is absolutely due for start. And so there's that piece for consistency, right, as you go forward, so that people can see that the rate is consistent. I think that that's important. And one thing to think about too, at least just from my experience, is people don't necessarily look at the M&O and the INS rates separately. They look at them together. So with the tax compression that's occurring, that's mandated due to House Bill 3, that is driven by our property growth, their tax rate will go down this year. We are keeping the same INS rate, but their full tax rate will go down unless something crazy changes in the next month. But according to the anticipated tax rate that the 22-23 budget was adopted upon as an anticipated tax rate, the rate will go down. So I think that's something to keep in mind, and it's just best practice, especially in the fast growth district, to take your debt and as you continue paying. I know that paying down the debt and all of that is really, and having more options to be able to refund bonds as well, which is something that we did 2 years ago, and then we fees, and we continue to do that, and continue to make those promises. So I think that's really the course we want to use from a financial perspective. It's really fiscally responsible. Yeah, because otherwise we get into this shell game of, and new people are going to come in, and then all of a sudden all the new people are going to see their rate go up, and then you're going to have no hope for fast.
Right. No, and I completely understand that, I'm not saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that more, maybe later with education piece, that we're packaging the bond at this, and maybe you reduce it a little bit. Ultimately, whether it's 450 million or 500 million, it's not really going to have that much of an effect on what we pay in taxes. And that's fair. Everybody's going to have a big impact on what we pay in taxes
No matter what.
because it's obvious why. I mean, everybody's bills are going to go regardless, but I don't know if that matters.
And sir, trust me, I'm not ignoring you, I see your hand raised. If you don't mind, because we've got a lot of runway to cover still, I'll be glad to visit with you like we did on Monday evening. And I'll visit with you after we make sure this committee's satisfied, but I'll be glad to do that.
I just wanted to know if we're allowed to vote on this again.
Say that again.
Are we allowed to vote on this list again?
So, that's part of why we're here. I want all of us to digest this. We're not going to do like we did on Monday evening, but if anybody hears some of what the information you're hearing tonight, the things you're digesting, and you think differently about this, you may think that we're good, and this group needs to weigh in on that, or you may think you've heard some things that make you uncomfortable and you want to change something. So that's what I need to hear from you. Otherwise, we're going to land on, do you guys think this is good, that you can support, and you think you can get the votes that you need based on what Ryan's laid out to you this evening, based on the things we've talked about, based on the feedback of the committee members, where do you think we are right now relative to this?
I think we add the research limits to it, and that's it, we move forward.
We have one committee member that says He thinks we add Rooster Springs
For the optics.
project to this, and we're good. And anybody else have an opinion?
I agree with that.
I question Proposition C with the concerns of it causing Proposition A.
So we have an agreement with what this committee member just said. We have some other questions of Proposition C based on what she's heard about. Your concern is about Proposition C landing at...
Causing Proposition A to fail.
Okay, so we have concern about
On
Proposition...
that line, on that note, I strongly felt that we didn't need it at this time.
Okay,
What would qualify under Prop C? Of this list?
Stadium expansion.
Just the refurb?
Just the stadium.
The stadium expansion.
It's just that 15 million.
yes, that's statement. Yes, ma'am.
So my question is, if this bond passes, whatever it is tonight, how far out is the next bond? And on the heels of that, could any of these things be moved to that one? Or would that even matter?
It's at least 4 years out, it's kind of what we talked about when y'all were planning, y'all were looking at kind of those pieces of work if they're not. Could things be moved? I mean, I think there's some conversation about that. Sarah had posed, could the stadium wait until we have varsity athletics? Given what we've heard, is that something we need to consider now, that now might not be the right time, that lowers our rate, it takes one thing off the plate. You know, I think there are ways that we can reanalyze that. I wanted to propose, could we maybe give table some time just to look at the
That's
list
what I
for our
want to get to
eyeball?
the end of questions,
Okay.
and then give it just time. But
Yeah.
I want you guys to digest everything we're talking about here, come to the end of questions, and we're going to need to have some time for you guys to talk about this, because to answer your question fully, Jennifer, can you move some things around, take them off? That's what we're here for. If there's something that, with the information you've heard, causes this entire committee to say, we uniformly think something else needs to be done, or we're going Monday night, that's what we're here for. Yes, sir.
And that's the strategic part of your work, right? The first piece was what should be and what should be out, y'all are building to a number. Now you gotta take that step back into the chart and say, can this pass? And are these the right things in totality? Is there a single item that's gonna be, or there are items that might be, those need to come off in ways to regroup and not let them
And can this pass with the context of how we're going to have it be packaged?
So we're going to see if there's a way for us to maybe group these in a way where we say, okay, this is
My understanding
Right.
is the way it is.
So Ryan, the question was, I'll answer, but you can't pick and choose how you establish propositions. Those are required by statute to be organized.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say, if we wanted to work with council to take just the high school and create a high school proposition, just an element.
Hey, guys, this is important. I want everybody to,
So
Ryan's trying to answer what you were talking about. I think this is
the
important.
district can work with council to split this thing into multiple propositions. Give them a choice on just the high school, just the elementary, just the middle school, just the, as much as we want, they can slice and dice. It affects the overall outcome. I've seen that happen. I've seen propositions just in the last 2 years where it was Prop A, B, C, D, E, F, and they all failed because of one. So keep that in mind. It's safer to package all of your growth things into one proposition. You start splitting them up because you need them all. One of them goes down, affects and heavily weighs on the fact that it's going to bring the other ones down.
So you said in November elections, Prop C being on there, like the stadium, can have a negative impact on whether or not the growth is going to.
It can drag Prop A down. Not to
10
say
to
that
15%, maybe.
maybe,
Right.
maybe. And it's just a few cases.
But to that point, from a sales standpoint, the stadium doesn't pass. And let's say everything turns to be real about the pain of having 6A competitions and not enough bathrooms and all that. Doesn't that make 2 years or 3 years or whenever the next proposition come up, oh wow, we really do need that?
More likely.
For sure. It's a tough decision.
Well, I mean, if Prop C fails, that means Prop A fails too, or?
Not necessarily.
Right.
But
So I think-
you're going to have that much more percentage turnout to support it.
But I think coming in and saying it's $500,000 or $500 million in a proposition or a bond election, and then you pull out 15 from that and another 7 to 8, well, that number for the things that really, really, really matter is a little more reasonable. an unreasonable.
It gets you under that $500 threshold, that mentality.
You know, because we didn't need it. I mean, the growth this year, we're not stopping it. They thought we could stop it, we couldn't, and we're still not going to be able to. We had to build more schools.
So we're about to turn all of you to each other to dissect this. We're going to revisit this, and then we're going to revisit this discussion once you complete. We're going to give you a little time to do that. And then as we finish this evening, we're going to talk about how the bond campaign portion of this, beyond this effort, takes place, and what that looks like, just an overall, whether this is November, whether it's May, whether it's any time, what that looks like, because some of these questions are pertinent to that. So let's take a little bit of time here. Let's give ourselves, we're going to give ourselves 15, 20 minutes. And what we'd like to have you do with that is weigh everything we've talked about here. If you need to revisit, when we've talked about this, guys, and visit with each other at different tables, and this either stays exactly like it is, or we need to make some modifications to it based on what we've heard, that's what we'd like you to land on. And you're not all at the same table exactly necessarily where you then talk to each other, but let's do that for the next 15, 20 minutes.
Well,
Okay, everybody. So let's talk about what we're trying to accomplish. First, let's talk about timing. Is there anybody in the room that is not confident, committee members, that this bond can be packaged and go in November? Is there anybody not confident that this can be a bond referendum recommended to the board for November of 2022?
I'm not confident with proximity.
Okay?
So if that were removed and perhaps some adjustments were made, then.
So we have one committee member that said they're not confident if Proposition C, which is the stadium proposition, is in the bond referendum.
And we, at our table, we talked about, with Ryan, about how we could possibly take that out of this one and move it to May. How that might be a better option. That
Did that have to be a waiting period between them?
We just wouldn't vote C.
we wouldn't
Just
vote,
push it.
we just push it to May, and that would possibly give it a chance for people to see. This year, we will be 6A, and they'll be able to see like that there is a need for this expansion. Possibly, I mean, that might be a way, and then that way they can either vote yes or no for just the stadium part of, but go for the things that we know that we do need. We know that we are growing. We know that we need a new high school. We know that we need elementary schools. Like, those are things we know for certain that we need.
Okay? Anybody else in question again? Does anybody not think that we can go in November?
Our table fell in line with the same line of thinking. It seems like that maybe we take the stadium out of this bond because it will not be needed until, what did we say? 2027, 28.
Okay. So we have.
28, 29.
We have a voice from each table, that has expressed they think that November is a viable solution if the stadium proposition were removed from the recommendation to the trustees to call them off.
Yes.
And still at Rooster Springs?
We have other items we can talk about, but that one, I think everything.
Okay, so as of right now, we've got a committee that's agreed that November's viable, excluding the stadium proposition. I heard another voice about something.
Yes, there are other things that we feel that maybe our president will throw up there.
Okay? Let's address them quickly. Let's see what we got.
I guess the band practice not lighting is quite throw up flags, especially at this cost. And if the things go out and continues out, this verbiage going up, not very clear as to what the line item is and you would get. For the fact, so for example, the building for the 18 plus, I'm not sure that everybody understands what that is. It's last night.
And one of the points that we talked about is because the language here actually says serving 30 students for $3 million. If that's taken out of context and people don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's not very clear.
And it's shared on social media, it could really be misleading. And so.
I will also point it out, as one of the special ed representatives on the committee, is that these are the most at-risk.
Oh, no, we're not
Oh,
proposing,
Well,
we're not saying.
That's
take it
part
off.
of the issues
We're
that,
saying-
because I didn't know,
You've written different.
so I've already
Yeah.
listened to the same thing.
So
So I
let's,
have no idea what's
let's,
going on.
let's be mindful of this. You are not currently reading the bond language as it was
But right, but
presented.
this is a material public.
Right,
That they
right.
don't access.
Yeah, and to the point on the, if I may jump
So you're
on.
saying you're in favor of including it if the bond language describes it appropriately, so it describes what it is?
That our notes that are put on the website are also corrected.
Yeah,
Okay?
So
That's
that
gonna
the
happen.
public
Okay.
doesn't see it written certain.
Yeah,
Yes.
I need to add on.
Okay.
Daryl, can we just take out all the C's and the C's?
But to the point on the parking lot and what the band director said on tape last, or on Monday, about the White's wish list, could be cause a problem when people do go review those tapes.
Yeah, we'll look at that.
It will say, that's how it works.
Okay?
So anything that appears to be fluff or wish list
Yes.
can certainly cause problems.
So let's quantify that. Does somebody have an item, a specific thing or things that they need to have addressed to be comfortable with where you are right now? What we've landed on, let's be specific about it. What we landed on is the committee as a whole feels comfortable going for November, excluding the stadium proposition. If we have specific items that you think need to be in or out, whether we need to address, let's do that with the group and do it loudly, please.
So I have more.
Okay?
Or we have more. So one of the things we thought might, can you speak up? One of the things we thought would be a red flag is the sound and lighting system in spaces. There is.
Are you asking, are you recommending to remove them?
We're remove that.
Okay?
Give the,
Is
that's
that
something that is not necessarily needed, but something.
Is that the project that's expected to pay for itself in 3 years because of the energy savings?
Because of the LED lights.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It absolutely is. We understand that.
But the public
Right.
may not. So that's maybe understanding how we can help educate the public
Or, you know, make it, or say something different that it
So-
doesn't come off as.
I'm not trying to put this off because I'm about to address this. There is a bond promotion and campaign that will take place. There will be a facts-based presentations, many of them. Your superintendent's about to get worn out with this process, and this committee recommends, the board calls. She and your team here will lead fact-based presentations about what all this is in detail and why, and field questions about those things. So as a part of this campaign, there would also be potentially a group that promotes that, that's not the school district, Ryan will address some of that. So there's some, I think in terms of how this is presented to the voters and how this is presented during a promotion, there's some things that haven't happened yet, but will.
Well, and us understanding what that is I think, helpful even considering these things.
So are we saying that, do we have committee members here tonight that voted on these items, approved them, landed on them on Monday, and don't know what they are? Is that what we're saying, that we need further explanation for committee members here tonight, or?
No,
Okay.
for the public.
So let's take, unless you think it needs to be out, let's table that for just a second, because there will be a whole component of this about presenting that properly to the public, so people understand clearly.
So we're back, so you're wanting to remove an ad, so we're removing the Tiger Stadium.
Show of hands if you feel confident in packaging this and promoting for a November bond referendum, to recommend that to the trustees. Raise your hands.
Recommending what?
Raise your hands if this, I just want to make sure.
Okay.
Raise your hand if you as a committee, individuals in this committee, are confident that you can have a bond referendum recommended to the trustees for November of 2022.
As
In
a
general. In general.
We want to go in November.
You want to go in
Who wants to go in
November?
November?
Okay, so
All right, everybody wants to go in November.
going in November. Now, what is going to go in this bond referendum in November? We've heard from 3 tables that you don't want the stadium project in there. Any other projects we don't want in there, that have been left out that have to be in there? Yes, ma'am.
We actually talked about, a little bit at the end about adding.
Little louder.
We actually talked a little bit at the end about adding a project, that if we took out the stadium, going ahead and giving those collaborative spaces to DSE while the building is ripped apart, and they're doing all of the work, just do all of the work at once. Because they're gonna continue to ask for those spaces, it seems to logically make the most sense while it's a construction site, do the whole thing.
And
What's the cost of that?
and the CLNI.
It was,
The Rooster.
and the Rooster Seal Night,
Everything for the
Roosters, 194.8,
and 174.
yeah, 1.743.
So it's less than $500,000.
$500,000?
No, 1.7 is the.
1.7 million?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're taking away 14 and adding 1.7.
Yeah.
I would just ask if anybody,
You'd be subtracting 12.
if anybody completely disagrees with that. So we're taking out 14 point something million worth of a stadium, and we're adding in 1.7 collaborative spaces. Is anybody completely opposed? Is that gonna kill the bond?
I don't think that's gonna kill it. It's good.
I think it's,
It's a good add.
I think
It may get us some votes, right?
right.
Okay. Done.
Okay,
Do we vote on those individually?
yes, so,
Just making sure to follow through.
show of hands for who agrees with removing the stadium proposition from the bond referendum package. Okay, so that's unanimous. Show of hands for who agrees with removing the stadium proposition to adding back the proposed project. So just to be clear, we talk about a individual project? Which project?
We have two different
Collaborative
ones, I think,
spaces.
under consideration, the Rooster CLNI and the DSC collaborative spaces.
Okay.
Two separate line items.
That we-
And I think we should vote on them separately.
Yes.
Okay,
So adding,
Is it just the DSE collaborative? or is it
Just the DSE collaborative,
Remind me what the.
because they're redoing the whole building.
For the teachers.
They're doing the whole modernization, add everything to it at once.
I think the only thing I want to add is clarification. So reconfiguring the CLNI doesn't add square footage to, we're not talking about either of those campuses. But if the addition of the collaborative spaces, because in order to add those collaborative spaces, you're basically taking over existing classrooms. In order to do that and not give up capacity, we're going to have to add the classroom space or add some additional square footage. I want to make sure that.
Correct, but then everything would match in the building too.
But are there other collaborators, or, sorry, additional collaborative spaces being added in the existing projects on this list right now? That, like, I understand what you're asking to add for Rooster Springs, but if that added here, anywhere else?
You're saying DSS?
We're talking about those separately, so we talked about.
we're just talking about the collaborative spaces on DSES.
I know.
It's on page 20 of meeting 4, so if you want to try and look at it. Just so that, I mean, you know, it's easier to follow along if you can find it in your book. So, meeting 4, page 20.
And we also, so y'all had said no to the additional collaborative spaces at DSES and Rooster. They both had CLNI collaborative spaces and additional collaborative spaces.
I have concerns about adding space to buildings so that you make up for taking instructional space away. And that might cause more problems for the seller.
That's why I wanted to just make the point that adding those, the more expensive collaborative space item, the reason it's more expensive is because you're renovating existing space and adding additional square footage.
270 square feet, 2,700 square feet of additional classroom space.
Is this, I mean, just looking out in the future, I don't see this as something that they're ever going to not want moving forward as kind of seeing it as an equality piece that it exists in several of the elementaries already. They already have collaborative spaces. Like how much, if we don't do this, and we do all of the other things right now, we add a fire lane and other things like that, would we have to kind of undo to add this to the next slide? If that's,
I'm more worried about this selling right now and anything for being perceived as unnecessary, or you're taking away my classroom spaces, or, you know, you're doing something that's not required for the growth. A lot of these things, we can all stand up very strong with our community and our HOA or our Facebook groups and tell everybody how important it is. But if there's even one person on this committee that doesn't 100% support that, then it can take down just by rumors spreading.
but there wasn't 100% support for everything we voted for in the first place. So you're not gonna get that. We did not have that on every single line item on Monday. That already exists out in the world.
So from a messaging standpoint, just real quick, just educating the public on the value of these types of spaces. Forgive me if I'm wrong, a couple of your campuses have these spaces.
Right.
And we're talking to them, John. It's a parity issue. Okay, as educators, as a school district, we need to give every child equal opportunity to the same type of experience in their educational environment. So from a messaging standpoint, we are not going to get into, oh, we cut out classroom space and had to add on. We're trying to give every child and teacher the same equal learning opportunities, period, across all campuses. And this is common in all districts across the state. And effectively, we are not taking classroom space away because we're going to be adding that back within the context of creating a parity at the same time. Just from a pure messaging standpoint.
That's helpful
Now,
to understand.
sure. And while we will have some people come and ask detailed questions about how exactly is that going to work, well, we've got to rip the wall out, we have to add on to the building, we can explain that to those individuals that have those questions. But from a basic marketing, communications, and education standpoint, we're creating parity for all of our elementary kids.
I also wondered if we need to break back for a second and revisit. We don't have 100% support on it every item. Do we need to break back and look at that for a second to make sure that we're getting to some of those items that we don't have support in for figuring out are they necessary or not necessary?
Let me ask another question. Are we going to finish tonight? None of you let me finish my sentence. Are we going to finish tonight with some things still hanging out there? I want to offer this. Does this group, I'm not trying to put you to more meetings, sure. Does this group need to reconvene? Looks like we're pretty close. Does this group need to reconvene? Or are there some of these items you feel like we could settle on tonight and finish this? If there is some runway between now and the time you'd recommend, and the time the board would call, we don't want anybody leaving
I'd
here
rather
feeling
go
like something was
overtime
rushed
tonight
and wasn't
than
answered.
done.
What's that?
I'd rather go overtime
Okay.
tonight and get it done
All right.
personally.
That's good to
but I don't
hear.
have
So, it sounds like we have a couple of projects that are, are there any other than these couple of projects we're talking about that we need to vet here? Because it sounds like short of that, if we want to get this done tonight, good. Nobody's pushing you to get it done tonight if we need more time. But having said that, if the goal is, and you feel comfortable that we get this done tonight, sounds like we've got a couple of projects here for consideration.
Right.
Do we have any others? Yes, please.
All right, John, my question, is there anybody who's just directly against either one of those, the collaborative space projects that we can?
Is anybody against those two projects being in the bond and the bond as it's packaged with the stadium out? Is that how you're asking that?
Yes, sir.
Is this both, are you saying the collaborative spaces at each school, or the
Or
collaborative
the ones-
spaces
The
at one
booster,
school?
the booster CLI and the DSC thing, and also keeping in mind the 16% growth for elementary, every square foot as we're growing and building buildings is going to be used and needed to count. And I think that's got to be a part of the messaging too, that 16% growth rate. I mean,
So let's get to the messaging. Let's talk about the projects and whether they need to be, we're going to get to this. But do we need, is everybody on board with, speak up please if you're not, the bond as it's packaged without the stadium and with these two projects that we're talking that are under consideration right now, included in the bond? Does everybody feel comfortable supporting supporting that, as I just described it, with detail, with messaging, with descriptions of projects, presentations to community members, et cetera, with that as just described.
Yeah, that takes us to FYI to 487.8.
Yeah, I mean, I'll dissent. I don't know that I am. I think when we voted on these items previously, you know, without bumping up kind of against the restriction of cost, you know, it did make the cut. And I'm not, you know, I'm not saying it's not needed. I'm not saying we should shoot for parity, but you know, we kind of made that decision as a want versus the need. And so I get that we're taking out the stadium, which I think is fiscally responsible and makes sense. So I don't know. Part of it seems, you know, a little bait switching, and then okay, what can we, you know, let's try and add everything back in that we can, when you know our rationale 2 days ago was that it wasn't necessary. And so, you know,
I totally agree with that.
and you know, I think it's important to stay below that 500 million mark. I think, you know, it sounds simple, but there's a big difference between a 5 and a 4. But I think, you know, every little bit that we can take down and keep the needs focused, you know, will help us pass.
Anybody have a response to that comment? Because I have a suggestion. Anybody have a comment or response to that?
I'm curious, is Rooster, CL, and I the only P1 we did not include?
Yes,
Yes, Rooster, CL, and I the only P1 we did not include in the packet.
yes.
Yes.
Right, Harvard.
But I will play the other side of that and say I absolutely agree with having that back in, based on the minimal cost and the fact that we did pass it on one and not the other.
So it sounds like a lot of people might agree with adding Winter Spring CL and I back in.
Yep.
Is that right?
I'm okay with that.
Good compromise. Yeah, take that in the collaborative space.
Anybody not okay with that
Take the
compromise?
What about the bandwagens?
Anybody not okay with that
For
compromise?
that 1 month out of the year that they're gonna use it?
Let's close out that discussion right there. Anybody not okay with that? Okay. Any other items, discussion, things you think need to be out in? We're getting close here, so let's. Any other items? So where we stand right now is the group agrees
I
with
think
the
you just brought
package.
up.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, van lights.
Okay,
So, I think, you know, part of the discussion that we had was, absolutely, you're talking about a month out of the year. And you gave what was said on camera. You said a month. And then maybe it goes into November. That's what the band,
Always.
right, you know, I don't know if that $1 million for that kind of usage, on top of the fact that they have to get the city of Dripping Springs to change, which is probably pretty what happened,
Just an ask.
to change the, you know, how it's set as a practice field or whatever, you know, the
Parking
terminologies
lot
that they have. Parking lot versus a practice field. And his excuse or his reason, I won't say excuse, his reason for not using portable lighting was no place to put it. And dragging it back and forth, I still don't see, I mean, we have a huge community here of people that would support and be able to handle that, I think. We've got plenty of rental companies around here that would love to put up a banner, donate portable lighting unit for the band. I would think, I'll do it. I'll pay for the lighting. But I don't think we can justify $1 million for that.
any other discussion on that item?
I have
Comments?
Thomas Wengel on video saying he'll pay for
The portable lighting. Not the $1 million. But the portable lighting, I think that's something that can definitely, that is something that can be done with booster help, with company help, and all that good stuff. stuff. And I think it's another $1 million, and I think it's another $1 million off the bond.
That would take us to 485, 197.
I know that I was one of the ones that did not raise my hand on Monday night on several things, but in my good conscience, when I go to sleep at night, if I put my head down on that pillow and know that everything that's in this bond package is going to help us curb student growth, then I can support it. Because everything on the things that are, I consider fluff, because there's scheduling, there's different ways around it, there's different spaces, there's all kinds of things you can do. And coming, again, I know y'all are sick of hearing this, but coming from a high growth district, that's what we did. We maintained, we did what we needed to do, we thought, we used, out of the box thinking to get through those few years till we caught up and we were landlocked and we knew there was no more growth. So then we could come back and we promised those campuses, just give us a few years, we promise we're gonna come back and the equity and the parity can take place. Meanwhile, our kids will still be learning because we come from a community that must have their kids learning. And that will happen no matter where they are inside a building.
Tell us what you're making.
I would look, the bond package without the stadium, without band lighting, I don't want collaborative spaces taking out, I think that would be bad if we're taking away classrooms. To change those to then add classrooms, I think that is not supporting student growth in my eyes. That's adding additional classrooms after you've taken them away is not supporting this huge growth increase.
Let me touch on something. We're at 7:55. We don't have a group that now is uniformly in agreement with everything that we have identified here. Can we get there? Do we need to meet again? Can we get there tonight? What's holding us up from getting there tonight? Or is everybody fatigued tonight and wants to get there another night?
You're done.
We just have one point here.
Get
we're not
it
doing
done
that.
means we have
Band lights.
an agreement.
Yeah,
We
band lights.
have a recommendation. Is everybody in favor of the Rooster CLI project? Yes?
Yes.
Raise your hand, please, if you are.
Yes.
Okay. Let's have a hand vote on the light fixtures at the band practice facility. If you are in favor of them, raise your hand. So we have
Are you wearing the
only
shirt
two in
today?
favor.
Yeah.
Don't wear the shirt today.
So, will this group agree? Please speak up. For the bond referendum in total, with the stadium removed, with the Rooster Springs project included, and the lighting removed for the band practice area at the high school. Does this group agree with that? And will this group support and promote that?
Yes.
Yes.
Raise your hand if that answer is yes. Okay. We are all in agreement. If you guys are okay with this, good job. If you guys are okay with this, I don't know what your time's like. I would like to, if we could, because you have agreed on that, have Ryan take a few minutes and run through some things that have to do with, they're very pertinent to what's going to happen next, relative to the promotion campaign of the bond program. So, can you do that for a few minutes? Yes, sir. Are you guys okay with that time-wise? Yes. Okay.
Okay. So, don't want to take a lot of time on this, and happy to answer any questions you have. But we're running a little bit late, so I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. And this is more of an educational type thing, so you understand when we go out to communicate with taxpayers how it's structured.
Did I do something to you? Here we go.
Okay. This is a major thing, especially this November. In looking at this November, if our school board does in fact choose to call the bond election, we have a lot of hurdles that we've already discussed that are going to be in place. So there's a lot of reasons that we're going to have to, in this particular election alone, unlike any other, this group here is going to have to work extra hard to get the vote out. okay? If we're effective at getting the vote out, we can pass this bond. One of the main things as we move forward is getting people registered to vote, okay? Educating people on the facts, starting the day after the board calls the bond, or even before that. Begin talking about it, okay? Our board may call a bond for this November. We expect that you would be registered to vote, do your civic duty, and go and vote and support the kids, right? So this is a major thing that often gets overlooked. We have a lot of people that reside in this district that are not registered to vote, that should be registered to vote, and they should be voting. Effectively, we're going to be dealing with two campaigns. There's a group out of Austin called the Texas Ethics Commission that dictates the laws as it relates to our public school district and what they can and can't do as it relates to communicating school bonds to our taxpayers. Effectively, they cannot advocate, they cannot tell our taxpayers to vote for or against the bond. So once our school board, if in fact our board does call it, our school district officials, employees, and everybody associated with the district would go into a kind of informational, factual, information-only mode, if you will. During school district hours, using district-owned resources, district-owned property, they can't use any of that to tell a voter how to vote, either way. On the opposite side of that, you all, and I hope every single one of you, if and when the board calls the bond, don't get lazy on us. Stay involved. That's the work that's really going to matter, specifically for this November. It's going to be huge. And you will have a lot of support. Trust me, a lot. So stay involved. The board calls the bond. That group on the right is going to make it happen for this bond. There's all kinds of different assets and things that go into the district side as it relates to educating the public. Again, educating the public. There's going to be, our superintendent's going to be doing presentation after presentation. They would look at assembling presentation teams, doing community forums, going to the different associations and community organizations, doing informational type presentations on what's in the bond, why it's needed, talking about the demographics of the district and what's happening with that dynamic, and obviously how it's going to impact taxpayers' pockets, which is very important. We're going to answer all those questions. They're going to provide resources online through the website where people can go and ask questions, Q&A, everything as it relates to the facts. There's going to be a lot of questions. So that'll all be set up. On the advocacy side, the PAC is basically going to follow in line behind the information and just share the great news about why this is desperately needed, okay? And if we don't do it now, we're only hurting the fast-growing community. In terms of the structure, you've got the district campaign, the PAC campaign, there's a lot of strategy and messaging, and a bunch of production and distribution to go into both. There will, in fact, now this is primarily a growth-based bond, so there's not, there's some work that's going to be going on at the different districts, but there's going to be campus-specific literature to communicate to the different campus constituents about what's taking place at that campus, specifically as it relates to safety and security, those types of items. The district's going to be communicating about academic performance, fiscal responsibility, those sorts of things will go into the literature. There will be direct mail, and as I already mentioned, the website. The big thing with your political action committee, which is a volunteer group that I hope each one of you would look to spearhead and take a part in, and I'm going to share a sample of kind of a political action structure that could be developed in the campaign. But as I mentioned, the group of attorneys out of Austin that deal with the Ethics Commission and the laws, there's filing procedures that have to take place with the political action committee. So some things that have to be taken care of, and that group is going to have some support in understanding what those laws are and making sure we're doing everything on the up and up and everything's fair. This is just an example of a structure. So your political action committee typically would have a chair or co-chairs, some leaders to kind of organize and oversee the overall effort. They would have to designate some sort of treasurer that goes into open records at the Ethics Commission on file. The Political Action Committee is going to open a bank account with whatever name the committee is going to be. And then all of the funds generated through private donations would go into that bank account. And then as they begin to purchase signs, T-shirts, advertisements, all of that gets spent from that bank account and reported to the Ethics Commission. Everything is filed for open records. So those that have questions about where the advocacy is coming from is available to them to go into. So just an example of some of the subcommittees, and this is important for each of you to know. In the event that the committee structures something like this, you have opportunities to volunteer your time, okay? And what I would say is everybody has kind of their own special talent. Some people are good at writing, some people hate writing. Some people are very good at social media or graphic design. Some people are really good at circle of influence, dealing with the who's who and the influential citizens of the school district and getting endorsements and followers to come in line with the campaign and get their support so that they can generate more positive votes at the polls. There's a group sometimes set up referred to as asset mobilizations. Basically everything purchased by the committee somehow has to get equitably distributed across the district so that we're communicating with everyone in all the neighborhoods and not just a few. So that group's responsible for taking all of the purchased assets like signs, flyers, push cards, and getting those out into the community. And there's a whole plan for that. And then, of course, the fun part with your political committees is fundraising. In terms of strategy and messaging on both sides, the ISD informational side and the advocacy side, there's a lot of activity that will take place with social media, websites, obviously direct mail, signage, billboards, and that would all be strategized about what would be most effective for this school district and highly effective. There's scheduling that goes into both campaigns so that we're properly educating the voting public from the ISD standpoint. And then, of course, your advocacy cheerleader group, the PAC, is going to set up a similar type schedule, strategic schedule, in order to spread the word about the proposed bonds. And obviously, production and distribution takes place on both sides. And then this is just an interesting thing that really hasn't changed even since the advent of COVID. But the 5 reasons that school bonds do not pass in the state of Texas, I could argue that number 5 is probably jumped up on 2. But obviously the tax effect, the point here is number 1. And here in the last 4 election cycles, in terms of the data that we track, the apathy is really embarrassing. And how more and more people just aren't exercising their right to go and vote, whether it's against or for. We've seen the numbers go down dramatically. Now, obviously, a lot of that's been brought on by the pandemic. But as we're coming out of that and our communities are becoming more comfortable with getting out and doing things, it's just going to be imperative that this be a major part of, if the board calls a bond, a part of this campaign is getting people off the couch and to the polls, specifically because it's such a growth bond, getting our new voters in town that have moved in with children off the couch and to the polls during early voting. So keep that in mind. So with that, I'll answer any questions. It will be a comprehensive, robust campaign. There will be a lot of refinement of messaging. There will be a comprehensive internet, social media, website effort on both sides. Fully backed and supported with all questions answered and everything legally adhered to going forward. So,
I have a question about your campaign for the PAC. Would all of those assets, because I had written down, like, we all need social media assets, video links, help share on our neighborhood HOA pages?
yes.
Are all of those things going to be sent to all of us? Or do we share them with each other? Like,
The volunteers that work on that committee are going to make that happen. There will be an organized effort to coordinate that and how that works with kind of some advice and direction on how to get things done, but the volunteers do it themselves.
Any other questions? So we want to take a minute, just a couple moments to thank you for your effort. We've got some goodies, some beverages and some treats. We'd like you to stick around. If you have questions, we're going to stick around to answer them. I've got a few words and some comments, suggestions from our superintendent, and then we'll wrap up the evening.
I will say when I can't believe we're here, holy cow, how did that happen so quickly? It's amazing that we got to this point. Thank you guys. I know that you have spent so much time, you have lived deep, and so much paperwork when you apply for school. So I really, really appreciate it. Tonight I heard something that I hadn't considered that I wanted to, well, this process officially ends. I want to invite y'all, I'm going to send you an email and reach out because y'all started having things that you just inherently know from being deep in this study and from knowing our community. What are things that we're going to have to talk about and share that are sitting in your head right now that you want to make sure that I communicate? So I'm going to set up a time with y'all for anyone who wants to come. It's optional, it's not a part of the committee, but I'd love for you to come. You had line items that you were like, gosh, in the light, you've got to say this, you've got to share what we know about this. I need to know what those things are. I don't want to miss something that you knew that was an opportunity that we had, and your voice has just been so important in this process, and it really is what is going to make this successful. So I want to make sure I get that. So just wanted you to know, you're going to get one more invitation from me. I hadn't planned on it. I said to Daryl, I need to meet with him again. No, but maybe I won't meet with come, but if you want to come, I'd love for you to come, because I do want to hear that. I want to make sure we figure that out. Again, I'll have to offer you as a sandwich. He brought ice cream, so I feel like that's even better.
If you do take her up on that offer, you'll have a number of us there as resources to answer any questions from technical to positioning to, so certainly that's a major thing if you want to take her up on that, and so please do.
There's a lot in your head that I appreciate the opportunity to hear it. Your voice matters. It matters in our community. It'll matter going forward. I'm a hugger, so I just want to hug all of you and say thank you so much. It has been amazing to do this whole process with y'all. Y'all are an amazing committee. You've gotten to know a lot of great people with you, and I feel like that makes this just really special. So I hope I'll see you lots between now and November, and that y'all will come out to lots of things that I'm at so that we can continue to see each other. I feel like this is an end to a great journey together, and I just can't say thank you guys enough.
And to punctuate what she's saying, hope to see you. This is going to be necessary to see you. Help push this campaign forward. So just,
I really think, yeah, and you don't have to come to this next Monday for agenda review, but the following Monday on the 20th, I think you're going to be wonderful. I really do. I think that this is your package, and I'm very proud to champion it. I'm very happy on our kids' behalf, but this is the work of an amazing group of people who care a lot about our schools and are trying to figure out the best way to make sure our kids, our teachers have what they need. That means a lot. My kids in the school, so it means a lot.
and we genuinely think this is not a simple process. This has been fairly protracted. It's been going on for a long time. So thank you for your commitment. We're going to hang around while you guys get yourselves some treats, visit for a few minutes. Some of these need to go over time. We're going to hang here, answer any questions you have, and enjoy yourselves. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.